Zoom.
Okay. Well, good evening now, and welcome everyone to this landmark event. Not only is the preview of the video that we are Suicide Prevention ERPO Public Education Work Group made, but it's the first time we've attempted to show the video using a Zoom format with this many people. So we really appreciate that there's so many friendly faces out there. And we'll be interested in your feedback and understanding that there may be times that we're working some of this out. Now, Rita, for some reason, you're on the screen, but I, okay. So, well, anyway, my name is Alana Smart, and I chair the Public Health Strategies Action Team of uh, CFCU, and I'm a member, longtime member of B'nai Havara. And I want to say good evening, and it was so good to see all of you coming on. And thank you so much for joining us to learn more about firearm suicides in Colorado and what we can do as individuals to prevent them. Many people, probably not many in this group, but many people in general, are really surprised to learn that over 70% of firearm deaths in Colorado are suicides, which can be prevented. And while professionals are a really important part of the solution, there are things that caring individuals can do to help save lives. Interviews with those who actually survived jumps off the Golden Gate Bridge revealed that most felt they would not have taken that awful, fateful step if just one person had connected with them personally in those critical last moments. Uh, and then there aren't many of you, but if you're new to this, CFCU is a multi-faith congregation, coalition of congregations working to reduce the deaths and injuries caused by the improper use of firearms. We have grown from 14 congregations in 2014 to over 58 now. And we do take a comprehensive approach to gun violence prevention, and that's why we have our advocacy team. Stephanie, who's here tonight, chairs that, and our public health strategies group, which I chair. On behalf of CFCU, which is Colorado's only faith-based gun violence prevention group, I'd like to share an opening reflection. This was written by Samara Schwartz, who is the executive director at B'nai Havara. And she shared this when we hosted the in-person preview at my congregation. In Jewish tradition, there is a powerful teaching. When you build a new house, you shall make a parapet for your roof so that you do not bring blood guilt on your house if anyone should fall from it. Rabbi Mamamadi explained this teaching. This requirement applies to a roof and similarly to any place that might present a danger and cause a person to stumble and die. Similarly, it is a positive mitzvah to remove any obstacle that could pose a danger to life and to be very careful regarding these matters. The point is simple and profound. If we know something can cause death, we have a responsibility to make it safer. A gun in a moment of crisis can become exactly that kind of danger. Research shows that when violent thoughts meet immediate access to a firearm, whether that violence is directed outward or inward or both, the results are too often irreversible. But when we create time, distance, and safety through secure storage, temporary transfer, community support, and honest conversation, lives can be saved. Suicide prevention is not about judgment. It is about care. It is about building parapets around the vulnerable moments of human life. We cannot prevent every tragedy, but we can choose responsibility over indifference. We can choose to protect one another. And we can recognize that safeguarding life is not only a personal act, it is a sacred obligation. And now I'd like to introduce Susie Pappas with Montview Presbyterian, my longtime tag team partner, and she leads CFCU's Suicide Prevention ERPO Public Education Work Group. And she's going to provide some background on why another suicide prevention video already. If you've been on the internet, there's quite a few. She's been tireless and valuable in her efforts to keep this project moving forward. Susie?
I need to unmute myself, don't I?
You
Great.
got it.
Thank
You got it.
you, everybody. Um, as I'm sure most of you know, despite numerous common sense firearm laws enacted over the past 15 years, magazine limits, safe storage requirements, extreme risk protection orders, to name a few, Colorado's firearm suicide deaths remain stubbornly high. Recognizing this, just prior to COVID, CFCU introduced our congregations to QPR, Question, Persuade, Refer, a suicide prevention program geared to lay people. We established a great relationship with Carolyn Swenson, an experienced QPR trainer, and hosted QPR sessions at 8 or 10 congregations. While extremely informative, the QPR training had limitations. It required a certified trainer, it was 2 hours in length, and it didn't include key information about the connection between firearm safety and suicide prevention. We also wanted a shorter, hour-long educational program that could be shown at convenient times, like after services. So after COVID, our focus switched to introducing our congregations to the new Extreme Risk Protection Order law with the help of a very informative Colorado ceasefire presentation on this topic. However, over time, we realized that while a critical tool in gun violence prevention, ERPO was only part of the answer, and we needed to broaden our approach. So in fall 2024, over 18 months ago, our work group did a deep dive into suicide prevention videos available on the internet, produced by groups ranging from the American Medical Association, the Firearms Injury Prevention Initiative at CU Medical School, as well as videos from several other medical schools, the VA, and the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Despite our best efforts, we couldn't identify a presentation that covered all the elements that we deemed essential, and we set about developing what we are proud and excited to introduce this evening. We sought input from our friends at CDPHE's Office of Suicide Prevention, Colorado's Office of Gun Violence Prevention, the Colorado AG's office, and other partners to review our proposed content and identify the experts whom you will meet this evening on video. So before we get started, I want to at least recognize our work team, who over the past 2 years have devoted their time and energy to this project, reviewing videos, meeting with experts, sharing their own professional expertise, developing key teaching points, and reviewing the drafts of the video while it was in production. So I can't ask them to stand here on Zoom, but I will recognize them. Rory Clausen is with Epiphany Lutheran. Rory serves as the treasurer and tech guy on the CFCU steering committee. Mary Helen Coughlin of Most Precious Blood Catholic Church. Mary Helen's, I think, a former school teacher. John Graves, St. Barnabas Episcopal. John is a retired psychiatrist. Marie Schaffner, who attends First Congregational UCC in Boulder, and Marie is a retired social worker. And of course, Alana, a driving force behind all this and many other efforts. So let me just say, your caring enough to take time for this presentation is a critical factor in preventing firearm suicides. As Alana mentioned, firearm suicides comprise more than 70% of gun deaths in Colorado, and contrary to popular belief, one, many of them can be prevented. There are things you can do as a caring person to help, and you don't need to be a professional to do it, and no, saying the S word will not make it happen. You'll be hearing from 3 respected Colorado professionals about all of the ways you can help when you're worried about a friend or loved one. A couple of comments before we begin. This is our second showing. Well, we had the in-person one at the end of May, and now this is our first virtual showing. So your feedback will be very helpful to us. We've developed a brief survey form, and we'll ask you to evaluate the presentation. We're going to send you email tomorrow with a link to the survey, and hope that you will provide some feedback. And also, we hope you will decide you want to schedule a showing of this for your own congregation, and you can indicate that on the evaluation form. And maybe most importantly, you really don't have to take notes tonight. You should have received an email yesterday that had a link to what we call our resources document that has all of the links and resources that our speakers will be mentioning tonight. So no need to try and get all those URLs down, because you will have access to a document that covers that. So anyhow, we're ready to get started. I'd like to introduce Lawrence Hermance with the Alliance for Suicide Prevention of Larimer County. Lawrence brings a deep experience from his work providing QPR suicide prevention training, and as a veteran, having served as an Army medic. He is a graduate of the University of Denver School of Social Work. He will provide a general overview of the suicide challenge in Colorado. He will debunk myths about suicide, identify warning signs when someone is struggling, and provide pointers on how to begin the conversation. We're going to ask everybody to mute themselves, and we will begin the video presentation after Lawrence's segment is over. We will pause the video, and we'll have about 5 minutes to ask Lawrence questions before we continue. So here goes.
Okay, I'm going to start the video, and if anything's not looking right to you, wave your hand so I can fix it. And if you can't hear.
Prevention Specialist with the Alliance for Suicide Prevention of Larimer.
Can you do the full screen, Rita? Thank you.
I'm not seeing Rita's video. Are other people?
Well, I can see it, but it's not going. It started just briefly, it started, and then
Rita, my guess is maybe when you put it in full screen, it like took you out of the screen you were sharing. So
I had something on the right hand side, right next to the Lawrence's first slide that had nothing to do with the video presentation, and it started when Lawrence had already begun to speak.
Okay, so I'm going to start the video again. When I make it full screen, sometimes well, let's just see what happens, okay? I'll start the video again. Can you see it?
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lawrence Hermans, and I am a suicide prevention specialist with the Alliance for Suicide Prevention of Larimer
Not
County.
now.
Now
Yeah.
we
A
can
bit about
hear.
myself. Prior to this
Sorry.
work, I served as a combat medic in the United States Army, and I have a
Okay, so let's see if I can do this. Make the screen larger before I share it. Sorry, practice does not make perfect. Okay, so let's try this again, which is it on the screen?
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, so I think what's happening is when I make it full screen, it's sometimes, so let me see.
bachelor's in social work from Colorado State University and master's in social work from the University of Denver. At
So
the Alliance,
that's what's
currently
happening.
I primarily manage our men's outreach. I train.
Okay, so we're going to have to live with the smaller screen because when I make it large screen, it's losing the share.
Yeah, let's do that, Rita. Let's just, I think that it's still clear enough to see on the regular size.
Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Lawrence Hermans, and I am a suicide prevention specialist with the Alliance for Suicide Prevention of Larimer County. A little bit about myself. Prior to this work, I served as a combat medic in the United States Army, and I have a bachelor's in social work from Colorado State University and a master's in social work from the University of Denver. At the Alliance, currently I primarily manage our men's outreach. I train community members in evidence-based suicide prevention trainings, and I run our medication and firearm lockbox program. Today, what we are going to focus on is how we as community members can notice concerns, how we can ask directly about suicide, all with the goal of connecting people to more safety and support. We're going to move through these slides pretty quickly. I don't have enough time to cover everything that is on each slide. But with that said, though, I would happily answer any questions or address any concerns that folks might have via email. You're more than welcome to reach out to me at lawrence@suicideprevent.org. Before we get started, I also just want to call out that we're going to talk openly about firearms and suicide, and this can be difficult. This isn't something we typically talk about in our day-to-day lives, and it's very likely that everybody sitting in this training might have a different experience when it comes to suicide. We're going to recommend to take care of yourself during this training and to take space as needed. Here's the roadmap, though, for this section. First, we'll look at suicide as a public health issue, and to do this, we will pull in some data. Next, we'll clear up some myths and facts related to suicide. From there, we'll walk through how to ask the question and what to do if somebody says yes, including what resources are out there and how do we best access them. When we talk about suicide deaths in America, I wanted to start us off by showing a big picture overview so we can better understand the scale of exactly what we're talking about here. Represented on the slide is the most recent national suicide death data from 2000 all the way to 2023. What you may notice is that each year, year over year, there are approximately 1,000 more suicide deaths in our country. In 2023, there were over 49,000 people who died by suicide in the US, and this is compared to just over 32,000 in 2004. Now let's take a look at where suicide rates are the highest. These numbers are age adjusted and they're calculated per 100,000 people. The national average is 14.7 per 100,000 people. As you can see, Colorado sits significantly higher than this national average at 22.1. In the suicide prevention field, we often think about why we think we see some of these states in the Rocky Mountain region experience such a drastically higher rate of suicide death. And we use an acronym to kind of discuss this. That acronym is the 3 A's. The first A stands for availability of mental health resources. Some of these states in the Rocky Mountain region just have more rural communities, and so they might not have mental health resources available for them to access. Which leads us to the second A, which is accessibility. Even if those resources are available for them to access, because folks live in rural communities, sometimes they might have to travel hours to get to that facility. They might have transportation issues. And so even if those resources are available, if folks have trouble accessing them, that can be a real barrier. And the third A that we'll talk about is acceptability. How socially or culturally acceptable is it to seek mental health care? Unfortunately, what we see in these Rocky Mountain states is they have a more cowboy mentality when it comes to seeking mental health care, or a pull yourself up by your bootstraps, if you will. And this can really discourage folks from feeling comfortable enough saying that they need support. Here's a snapshot of Colorado suicide deaths by age in 2024. As you can see, suicide touches every age group from teens all the way to older adults. A common misconception is that suicide is something that is primarily affecting our youth, but what we know and what the data shows us is that suicide is something that affects all age groups. What this means for us as community members is that we should be keeping our eyes peeled for all the risk factors and warning signs that we'll discuss later, regardless of if we notice these in teens or older adults alike. This slide represents men and women who died by suicide in Colorado in 2024. What you will notice on the screen is that men make up the majority of suicide deaths here in Colorado. What is not represented on the slide, though, is that women actually attempt suicide 1.5 to 2 times more than men do. They often will elect to use a less lethal means, which we'll discuss next. It is important to note that 61% of male suicides involved a firearm and 32% of female suicide deaths involved a firearm. Women think about and attempt suicide as well, but men are just more likely to die, with the biggest reason being that men are more likely to use firearms in attempting. When we talk about how people die by suicide, the method actually matters quite a bit. In 2024, about 54% of suicide deaths in Colorado involved a firearm, which makes firearms the most common method when someone dies by suicide. One of the reasons this matters is because firearms are extremely lethal. About 90% of suicide attempts involving a firearm result in death. If we compare that to other methods, people are much more likely to survive the attempt. For example, when someone attempts to die by suicide by overdosing on pills, the fatality rate is about 12%. That difference matters because what we know about suicide is that most suicidal crises are brief. When people survive an attempt and are able to get the support they need, they rarely go on to die by suicide later in their life. In fact, about 85 to 90% of people who are actively suicidal, who get connected to care, and who follow through with that care, never seriously consider suicide again. So when someone attempts suicide with a firearm, there's often very little opportunity for that second chance. The crisis itself might only last a couple minutes or even a few hours, but the lethality of that firearm in the home means there isn't much room for us to intervene. This is why suicide prevention really focuses on what we call lethal means safety. Lethal means safety is simply creating a little bit of more time and distance between somebody in crisis and that lethal means. Because sometimes something as simple as 10 minutes of distance or making it harder for them to access the firearm can actually be enough time for the suicidal urge to pass or for them to reach out for help. Suicide never affects just one person. Dr. Julie Searle with the University of Kentucky found in a 2018 study that on average 135 people are exposed to a suicide death. Out of these, roughly 53 people will experience a short-term disruption in their lives, 25 a major disruption, and 11 will have a devastating impact in their life. And if we think back to that first data slide that I shared that showed almost 50,000 people dying by suicide in 2023, and we multiply that 49,000 by this 11, that's over 500,000 people in 2023 that experience a devastating impact in their lives because they lost a loved one to suicide. All right, that's it for the data section. Let's continue by clearing up some myths related to suicide. The first myth that we'll talk about is that if someone really wants to die, there's nothing that anybody can do to stop them. What we know is that most suicidal crises are short-lived, and most people who survive an attempt do not go on to die by suicide. Just to reiterate, 85 to 90% of people who are actively suicidal, who get connected to care, and then who follow through with that care, will never seriously consider suicide again. This is why it's so important for us to be willing to ask the question so that we can help get them connected to professionals who can help. Myth 2 is that if I ask about suicide, I might put the idea in their head. What we know is that asking directly about suicide does not increase suicide risk. You can actually signal to that person, holy cow, they're willing to talk with me about this really heavy subject that we don't normally talk about in our day-to-day life. So you could really open the door for them to share something that they might not have shared before. You could open the door to a conversation they might not feel comfortable having with others. You are not going to plant the idea in their head. The next myth that we'll talk about today is that if it is serious, somebody closer to them will bring it up. The fact is that often everybody is worried, and people might not feel comfortable having these conversations about suicide with others. That means it's very possible that nobody has asked directly about suicide. And this is also why it can be so important for us to ask directly when we identify some of these clues and warning signs we're going to talk about next. The last myth is that maybe they're just talking about suicide to get attention. And the fact is, most people talking about suicide are signaling that they're in real pain. Folks might not have the best language to accurately describe exactly what is going on for them, and it can just come out as, I don't want to be here anymore. Even if somebody is bringing up suicide and it feels like they're trying to get attention, we're going to say to go ahead and give them that attention. It's likely they are struggling with something, and this is how they're choosing to reach out for help. So please do give them that help or find somebody who can help them. All right, now we're going to move on to risk factors and warning signs, or what are those things we should be keeping our eyes out for? The more of these risk factors and warning signs that you see should signal in you that it's appropriate to ask directly about suicide. With that, though, maybe you're just seeing one or two of these clues or warning signs, but it's really setting off that gut feeling that you have or those spidey senses. Go ahead and ask. First, we're going to discuss things you might hear people say. Now, people can talk pretty directly about wanting to die or take their lives. If I had somebody in my life that is mentioning some of these statements about wanting to die, I would definitely want to ask directly if they were thinking about suicide. Some of the statements at the bottom of the slide, though, statements about not wanting to be here, really require us to ask some more clarifying questions to get at the heart of, are they talking about suicide, or are they just trying to express a general struggle they're having? For example, if I heard somebody say, "Soon you won't have to worry about me," I might ask them something like, "Could you tell me a little bit more about what you mean when you say that?" The key here is any talk about wanting to die or not wanting to be here anymore is a reason to lean in and check in. Don't be afraid to ask more questions. The second category that we'll talk about today are things that may happen in somebody's life that can increase the risk. Now, these don't necessarily mean that somebody's going to go on and to die by suicide or even attempt, but they should raise our level of concern and signal to us that if we have people in our lives who are going through some of these challenges, that we are checking in on them and making sure that they have the supports that they need. One of the biggest life situations that can increase our suicide risk is loss of any major relationship. We need people in our lives to help care, nurture, and support us throughout our whole lives. And when we lose some of those very meaningful relationships and connections, our risk is increased. Next, we will discuss changes you may notice in people's behaviors or their moods. Now, if you were to Google, what are the suicide clues and warning signs, a very similar list to what you see on the screen is what would come up. I think especially with these behavioral clues, it's important to keep things in context for the person. For example, purchasing a firearm might be a big cause for concern if you know the person doesn't own any firearms and they've also been struggling with their mental health. For other firearm owners, just purchasing a new firearm alone is not that concerning. But if some of these other risk factors or warning signs were present, it might be. Something you can ask if you are unsure is, "Hey, what do you plan on using that firearm for?" Again, the more clues and warning signs that we see, the more it should just signal in us that it might be time to ask directly about suicide. All right, so once you have identified some of these risk factors and warning signs, the next step is just to ask the question. Now, you don't have to make things super serious right away. While it is important to ask directly about suicide if you're seeing some of those clues and warning signs, we also understand that that's not how conversation naturally opens up. On this slide, we kind of have some conversation starters that can get you into that conversation. Remember, the goal here is not to craft a perfect speech, but to really just signal that you care and that you're willing to listen. If you're concerned or your gut is telling you that something is wrong, it's important to move from a general check-in question to a direct question about suicide. What is most important here is that we use very direct language when we are asking. We're going to recommend to either use the words suicide or kill yourself. And this is because, language can sometimes be subjective. And so we want to cut through all that subjectivity and really get at the heart of what we're trying to know. Another thing we can do is bring in those risk factors and warning signs that we were able to identify, those reasons why we're asking the question. That can sound like this. Sometimes when people go through a divorce, they can feel really isolated and alone. And sometimes when they feel that way, they think about suicide. Are you thinking about suicide right now? This normalizes what's going on for them and lets them know they're not the only ones who might have experienced some of these challenges and also thinks about suicide. You may also have to ask more than once throughout the conversation. I've had to do this in the past and it can sound something like this. "Hey, I know I already asked, but I'm still a little concerned. I can tell you're really struggling and things haven't gotten better for you. So I'm going to ask again. Are you thinking about suicide?" The key takeaways on this slide are to be direct in the language that you use and that you may need to ask more than once. Go ahead and trust your gut with this. Once a person shares that they're struggling and thinking about suicide, the most important thing that we can do is to use our active listening skills. Things like making direct eye contact, nodding along when they're talking, and validating how they're feeling can really go a long way here. Asking open-ended questions as well can get them to share more about what's going on for them. The key here is to keep them talking for about 80% of the conversation, while you're just adding in the extra 20% to keep them sharing. After they'd answered yes, that they are thinking about suicide, try not to fix the problem. Try to just be a good listener and somebody that can follow along. You can also reflect to them what you hear. Saying things like, wow, that sounds really hard, can also be powerful. We want to avoid minimizing what's going on for them or trying to talk them out of their feelings. This subject can be uncomfortable to talk about. So we also want to avoid changing the subject. We want to sit in the discomfort with them. After you've listened for approximately 20 or 30 minutes, the next step is to simply ask, will you go with me to get help? Depending on how they respond will dictate what our next steps include. If they're willing to get help, the best referral option is taking them directly to one of our mental health urgent care facilities or calling 988 together. Sometimes, though, people don't always feel comfortable going somewhere immediately, and that's okay. If this is the case, it's important to ask if they're willing to work with you around keeping themselves safe. This might include temporarily removing firearms and extra medications from the household. Additionally, it's still important to encourage them to seek professional help. This kind of leads us to this 2-star next option. The next best option is to get a good faith commitment from them to accept help and then making arrangements with them so that you can give that help. You could really be the driver in this kind of situation. You can say something like, hey, I know you don't want to get help today, but I have Saturday off, and I know you have Saturday off. Would it be okay with you if we got together on Saturday and logged onto the computer and try to connect you to a therapist? Now, sometimes folks aren't really willing to do that option either, and that kind of leaves us with this last option. The last option is getting a good faith commitment from them that they will not die by suicide, and then checking in with them regularly to see if things have changed. That can sound like, hey, I know you don't want to get connected to a therapist on Saturday, but why don't we get together and watch a movie, or maybe get out of the house, we can go to the farmer's market. How does that sound? Then, when I was with them on Saturday, I would start this whole process over of asking directly about suicide, holding space for them to share, and seeing if they'd be willing to go get help with me. This slide represents the 3 different 3-star best referral options. The first option is 988, the mental health helpline. You can call, or you can text, or you can chat online with 988. It's available 24/7, is free, and is also confidential. When you dial 988 and then you dial 1, you'll get connected to the veterans line. When you dial 2, you'll get connected to a Spanish-speaking operator. You can call as the person who is in crisis, or you can call as the person who's supporting them. In Colorado, we also have walk-in crisis centers where people can go for in-person support. You can find the nearest crisis center to you by going to that website listed on the slide. We really recommend only calling 911 in circumstances where somebody has already hurt themselves or the person has a weapon and is in immediate danger on acting on their suicidal thoughts. All right, if the person doesn't want to call 988 or go to a crisis center immediately, there's still a way that we can support them and get them connected to professionals that can help. These are just a few therapist finder options that you can utilize to get somebody connected to care. Additionally, peer support groups or groups with other people who have struggled with thoughts of suicide can also be incredibly powerful when paired with therapy. Being the driver in these kinds of scenarios can go a long way because, as you may know, one of the telltale signs of experiencing a depression is not wanting to do the normal activities you used to enjoy. So imagine doing something as arduous as signing up for therapy, right? And if you can't do the things you normally enjoy, how are you going to do something like that, right? And so having somebody there to help could be a huge help. I wanted to end my portion of the presentation today talking about some of the things in our lives that can help protect us when we come across challenges. Feeling connected to others in our lives is one of the biggest protective factors that we have, as well as working with mental health professionals. There's also things we can do, like creating a hope box with reminders for our reasons to live or things that keep us here. Thank you so much for listening to me today. I know this was a lot to cover in such a short amount of time, so I do just want to extend the offer again. If you have any questions lingering or you'd like to talk about anything further, please feel free to reach out to me at lawrence@suicideprevent.org. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lawrence. And now we're going to take a few minutes for a question or two that Lawrence will try to answer here in person. And I see Eileen has her hand raised. But I will say that this resource document that you got the link to has the email addresses for all of our presenters that you could reach out to them, and they're more than happy to do that. So Eileen, you'll have to unmute yourself, and what is your question?
Yes, this was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, Lawrence. I I thought on accessibility, one of the factors that I've read is also accessibility to firearms. And here in Colorado, we're about average for the country, but um, that's not the case for many of the states that have far lower suicide rates than we do. And the other was an interesting one, a study a number of years ago, and it's another A by the University of Utah researchers about altitude. And the lower oxygen levels is a problem for people who are experiencing depression. And I was struck by that too, because many of the mountain communities in Colorado have high suicide rates. And I've seen articles about where they were discussing it, trying to figure out why. And they said largely it was the income disparity that exists in many of these resort towns. But I just thought I'd mention that because it's always been curious to me why, as you pointed out with the map, these Rocky Mountain, intermountain states, Western states have such high suicide rates.
Yeah, that's an astute observation, Eileen. I know, the Rocky Mountain region continues into Canada as well, and the territories along the Rocky Mountain region in Canada are some of the regions that experience the highest rates of suicide death in Canada as well. And there is one other study I've seen on a community in Peru where their suicide rates were, I think, 4 or 5 times higher in this one mountain community. And the researchers went in to try to do some analysis on whether elevation had something to do with it. But in the field, there's really not too much great evidence to kind of support it, and I think there's a lot in the suicide field that we think we understand, and there's a lot that we just frankly don't, and the research is lacking. And so don't have the best answer for you there, Eileen. But I also wanted to kind of briefly comment too on your first point about just access to firearms. I think that's a huge piece as well that, in one of our other trainings from the QPR Institute, they kind of hit on that one as well, that a lot of these states along the Rocky Mountain region, we just have more firearm owners, and this has got to play into, when folks are struggling with their mental health, having access to the means to end their life, I think definitely has an unfortunate reality to it.
And we're going to be talking about that in this next section, right? Lauren is going to talk about that. Stephanie, do you have a question? we maybe have time for one more.
Yeah, and maybe this was something that was said before Lawrence's presentation began. But I did want to. It was a great presentation, Lawrence, and I think one of the things that I felt really was very effective in carrying your verbal message was the appearance of the slides, the colors that were used, and how things were spaced. And you also have a kind of a soothing voice, Lawrence, and so I think the two really complemented each other and really helped to bring the messages home. So I did want to say that. Oh, also, I really liked your data section. That was, I thought, spot on.
Awesome.
Though I will say 2024 data are available, and for Colorado, 2025 data from the state health department should very shortly be available. It'll take a few months longer for the CDC data for the whole country to be available, but I don't know how you want to handle how the team wants to handle data updates.
Well, we will do that. I mean, this is not set in stone forever after. We will continue to update this as new data becomes available. I know you're that statistician, but these are mainly trends that we're talking about here. So I think that's kind of our main sort of focus right now. Okay, thank you. And I'm sorry.
Could I ask one more thing?
Quickly,
really quickly?
We have like 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll talk real fast. On the slides that had the resources that were available, how do people record those for use? I mean, it's one thing to look at the slide with Lawrence speaking and read everything, but
we provided a link.
How's that going to work?
We provided a link to an online website that has all of those websites and resources and stuff that you can access. You should have gotten an email.
And
you're going to get another email tomorrow if you missed the first one.
And I also put it in the chat this evening.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Rita.
Okay. That'll be really key when, the presentations really get rolling so that people have a way, Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And thank you, Lawrence. It was really excellent. And thanks for your questions. And now we're going to move on to the second section of our presentation. This is going to be given by Lauren Sinclair. She's a licensed professional counselor in Colorado with a Master of Arts in Mental Health Counseling and a Master of Public Administration and Policy. She works for the Veterans Affairs Administration in Wyoming and Northern Colorado. Suicide tends to be impulsive, so increasing the time and distance between a crisis and access to lethal means is critical. So Lauren will explain ways to increase that critical time and distance, covered the full range of secure storage options, including those required by law, explain how personal safety planning can help, and tell you about a brand new tool that recently became available. So we're gonna resume the video, and it's about, 10, 12 minutes long, and then Lauren will be available for some questions after that piece. All right. Thanks, Rita.
Community Engagements and Partnership Coordinator with the Cheyenne VA. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I focus on community-based interventions for suicide prevention. Today, I want to talk with you about one of the most powerful and practical tools we have to prevent suicide: secure firearm storage. This isn't about taking guns away or politics. It's about saving lives, protecting families, and promoting responsible firearm ownership. Over the next few minutes, we'll look at the connection between firearm access and suicide, explore what secure storage really means, and discuss simple steps that any of us can take or share with others to make a huge difference in our community. This model illustrates how suicidal behavior develops from a combination of emotional and situational factors. The three overlapping circles, thwarted belongingness, perceived burdensomeness, and the capability for suicide, help us understand who may be at risk and why lethal means safety is essential. Desire alone doesn't result in action. Capability is what bridges the gap. Capability increases through exposure to pain, trauma, or lethal means. For many, familiarity and comfort with firearms can increase capability because firearms are both accessible and perceived as effective. This is why secure firearm storage, locked, unloaded, and separate from ammunition, is such a critical protective factor. When desire and capability overlap, the risk for lethal or near-lethal attempt increases sharply. By reducing access to lethal means, especially during a crisis, we create time and distance, allowing suicidal thoughts to pass and life-saving interventions to occur. Encouraging conversations about secure storage with friends, family, and communities helps prevent tragic outcomes without taking away ownership or rights. We can't always control suicidal desire, but we can control access to lethal means. When we talk about suicide prevention in Colorado, we have to talk about firearms. Over 70% of firearm deaths in Colorado are suicides, and more than half of all suicides involve a firearm. These aren't just statistics, they represent lives lost and families deeply impacted. One reason this matters is the lethality of firearms in suicide attempts. Firearms are about 90% lethal, meaning there is rarely a second chance for intervention. That's why creating time and distance between a person in crisis and a firearm is so important. In Colorado, 71.8% of firearm deaths are suicides, making firearms the leading method of suicide in our state. Suicide is the 8th leading cause of death, and Colorado has the 10th highest firearm suicide rate in the nation. Here is the hopeful part. Delaying access to a firearm, even 5 to 10 minutes, can save a life. Secure firearm storage, keeping guns locked, unloaded, and separate from ammunition, creates time and distance between crisis and action. That small window allows emotions to cool, loved ones to intervene, and life-saving resources to reach someone in crisis. Firearm suicide prevention is about giving people more time and more chances to live. To understand firearm suicide prevention in Colorado, we have to also understand Colorado's firearm culture. Firearms are a part of daily life for many Coloradians, for protection, recreation, and tradition. Nearly half of Coloradians live in a home with a firearm, and 1 in 3 personally own. This means prevention messaging needs to meet people where they are, emphasizing secure storage rather than restriction. About 44% of homes with children contain a firearm, which makes secure storage a key public health priority. These statistics highlight how quickly a moment of crisis, whether in a youth or an adult, can become irreversible if a firearm is unsecured. The top reasons Coloradians report owning firearms are self-protection, family protection, and property protection. Many also cite exercise of their constitutional rights, hunting, and family tradition. These reasons underscore the importance of cultural competent, respectful approaches. We can support responsible ownership and safety at the same time. When nearly half of homes in our state have firearm promoting secure storage practices becomes a community-wide prevention strategy. This isn't about changing culture, it's about protecting what people value most, their families, their tradition, and their lives. By normalizing conversations around secure storage, we can honor Colorado's firearm culture while reducing risk and saving lives. Now that we've talked about why firearm storage matters, let's focus on what secure storage actually looks like. Many people assume that simply hiding a gun is enough, but hiding doesn't mean secure. True secure storage involves multiple layers of safety designed to prevent unauthorized or impulsive access. The first and most important step in keeping firearms locked, this means using safes, lockbox, cable locks, or trigger locks. There's an option for every type of firearm and household. The key point here is if it's locked, it's protected. Even a brief barrier can make a critical difference in a moment of crisis. If you don't have a lock, get one. If you need one, we know where you can get them. But you can also make the firearm inoperable by removing the bolt action or firing pin if you don't have a cable lock or another way to secure that firearm in the time being. Unloaded. Next, keep the firearms unloaded when not in use. An unloaded firearm significantly reduces the chance of fatal incident, whether accidental or intentional. It's a simple but powerful step that completes other safety measures. Next, store ammunition in a separate location from the firearm. This adds another layer of time and distance between a person and a loaded gun. You can also store your ammo outside the home and lock it elsewhere, creating further steps of protection. Separation can prevent impulsive access during moments of curiosity or crisis. It's important to remember that hidden firearms are not secure firearms. Often other people will know where guns are kept or how to access them, even when the owners believe they're safely concealed. True secure storage means that only the owner and no one else can access the firearm when it is locked away. Even when firearms are stored responsibly at home, there are times when temporary out-of-home storage can add another layer of safety. Colorado is leading in this effort with the out-of-home firearm storage map, which connects firearm owners to local law enforcement agencies, ranges, and retailers who offer safe, temporary storage options. Colorado also supports secure storage through policies like the 2021 Safe Storage Law, which requires locking devices with firearm sales and helps prevent unauthorized access. In addition, Donna's Law allows individuals to voluntarily place themselves on a confidential do not sell list for firearms during vulnerable periods. Together, these tools support responsible firearm ownership while giving individuals and families more ways to prioritize safety. About half of firearm ranges and 3/4 of law enforcement agencies in Colorado participate in offering short-term storage. This makes it easier for firearm owners to take proactive steps, without judgment and without giving up ownership. These options are designed to support firearm owners and communities by making temporary safety measures accessible when they are needed most. Temporary storage can be useful in several real-life situations, during personal or family crisis, or family legal proceedings, or when emotions are high, during extended travel, ensuring firearms are secure while away, and when children, teens, or guests are staying in our homes. These moments often pass, and having an out-of-home option helps ensure safety during high-risk times. Out-of-home storage can also be part of a personal safety plan, giving individuals and families a concrete step to reduce risk during difficult moments. Research shows that out-of-home storage can reduce suicide risk during periods of crisis by creating time and distance between an individual and a lethal means. Because suicidal crises are often short-lived, even small barriers like temporarily storing a firearm outside the home can make a life-saving difference. These strategies help people get through the most intense moments safely. Out-of-home storage isn't about taking guns away, it's about keeping loved ones safe until the storm has passed. It's voluntary, community-based, life-saving practices that respect firearm ownership while strengthening suicide prevention efforts. The good news is most firearm owners in Colorado are already taking secure firearm storage seriously. In fact, 90% report using locking devices on at least some of their firearms, showing that responsible storage is already a common practice. But there's still room for improvement. Not all firearms are secured all the time, and consistency is what makes secure storage effective. Responsible firearm ownership isn't just about having the right tools, it's about thinking ahead and using them in ways that fit your household and your lifestyle. Secure storage and the use of locking devices are more than a best practice. They're a core component of responsible firearm ownership. These actions protect not only the firearm owner, but also families, neighbors, and the broader community. Responsible storage means ensuring firearms are available when needed for protection, but inaccessible when they shouldn't be, whether that's to a child, a visitor, or someone going through a difficult moment. Many firearm owners already adjust their storage based on their circumstances, and that flexibility is an important part of safety. Secure storage is not a one-size-fits-all. The safest approach is the one that fits your household and adapts when circumstances change. For many people, this becomes part of a personal safety plan, thinking ahead about what steps to take if stress, crisis, or major life changes occur. That might include using additional locking devices, storing ammo or firearms outside the home, and asking a trusted person to help secure them. Planning ahead makes it easier to take action during difficult moments. Locking devices are common, but when they're used consistently and intentionally, they become powerful tools for protecting our homes, our communities, and the people we care most about. Everything we've discussed today, from understanding suicidal risk to firearm safety, leads to the simple truth. Every lock, every conversation, every moment of prevention matters. These 4 steps, lock, talk, revisit, and know, are small, practical actions that save lives. The first step is to lock it, unload it, and separate the ammunition. This is the foundation of firearm secure storage. It creates the critical time and distance that can prevent an impulsive act from becoming irreversible. Remember, safety measures don't remove protection. They ensure protection for everyone in the home. The next step is to talk about firearm secure storage openly with friends, family, and community members. These conversations can feel uncomfortable at first, but they normalize responsibility and build trust. The more we talk about secure storage, the more we make it a standard of care in our communities. And 4, revisit. Secure storage isn't a one-time decision. It's important to revisit storage plans as life changes. Whether it's a new child in the home, a family member experiencing stress, or a move to a new environment, reassessing access and storage keeps everyone safe. And finally, know your resources. Pause to Protect, Project Child Safe, Colorado's out-of-home storage map, Donna's Law, and the VA Lethal Means Safety Toolkit all provide tools, guidance, and locations for secure storage options. These programs empower firearm owners to protect what matters most, their loved ones and their peace of mind. When we take simple, proactive steps to lock, talk, revisit, and know, we're not just preventing tragedy. We're creating safer homes, stronger communities, and more chances for hope. Every lock truly saves a life.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Lawrence or Laura? Lauren, we've got the 3 L's here, Lawrence, Lauren, and Laney. So it's been kind of confusing, but thank you, Lauren, for sharing this with us. Do we have questions about the secure storage information that she's provided? There's a law in Colorado, I think, that you have to lock your gun, right? And in your car at home, that guns need to be secured, but it's more than following the law. It's your personal safety and that of your friends and family. Okay.
Yes,
Well,
I have a
okay,
question.
John, go ahead.
I'm anticipating showing this to my congregation, which is in a Capitol Hill community in Denver. And the issue is people who keep guns for self-defense. And the question is, if it's locked and separated from ammunition, is it really going to be self-defense in the first place? And I know you may have handled that quite a bit, so I'm curious about how you handle those kinds of questions.
Those questions come up all the time. And realistically, depending on the environment, the likelihood of you needing your firearm loaded and if you're in your home is different than if you're not, right? So it depends on the conversation. If we're talking about home defense, the ability, just like with anything, practicing and understanding your locking mechanism, there are definitely ways that you can lock your firearm for your lifestyle that allows you to still get to it. Some people might not be ready for that conversation or really utilize that as a way to say, well, I need to keep it loaded and on me at all times. And I would just approach it with a harm reduction with them. If, they have 3 firearms, they don't all need to be loaded and ready to go and staged around the home potentially, right? There's also a lot of classes they can take too. There's a number of advanced classes that many ranges offer after a concealed carry permit or after the concealed carry class, that I think would be something I would also recommend to them. Many times because they are with firing professionals and sport shooters, it's definitely a skill to develop. And so I would encourage them to get with those people and take those classes if they really have true questions about how they can do that for their lifestyle. Because I'm not going to be the person that's going to know how to work that for them. But that is the avenue I would take, is that it's a skill that can be developed. And there are people out there who can do that for them. An example is Shoot Indoors in Broomfield. They have a class that you can take post your concealed carry that talks about different ways, different things you can purchase for concealed carry and ways in which you can amplify, home defense while maintaining secure storage principles.
Thanks, that's very helpful.
Thanks,
I
Lauren.
I have a question. It just seems odd to me that in this day and age of smart everything, smart TVs, smart cell phones, we don't have any people talking about smart guns. I would think that would be very, very beneficial too.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that there's a lot of development in firearm manufacturing where they look at different ways in which you have, biometric, accessible firearms and things like that. However, I don't think we're quite there, but there are, you can say smart safes, if you will. They have biometric safes or safes that have the ability for you to change the code via Wi-Fi, so that if you weren't home or you needed to change it, you can do that. You can update the codes and things like that. They do have those. They can be a bit pricey and expensive, but that is definitely a possibility for some people. But if the power were to ever go out or Wi-Fi were to drop, I would really love to have a mechanical option. And that's why I think a cable lock is a really great place for everyone, even if you have those other devices.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren. So I think we're ready to move on to our final section, that is on extreme risk protection orders, or ERPO, as we sometimes hear them referred to. Our presenter is Lainey Sheffel, who is the Executive Director of Colorado Ceasefire. Lainey has a Master's of Public Administration and is well versed in the ins and outs of the ERPO law. And so I think we'll just go ahead and get started, and then she will be available for questions at the end. Okay, so Rita, you take it away.
Hi, my name is Lainey Sheffel, and I'm the Executive Director of Colorado Ceasefire. This training will provide an overview of Colorado's Extreme Risk Protection Order law and some of the legal considerations associated with the law. I'd like to note that the information contained in this training is provided for informational purposes only and should not be construed as legal advice. As you'll learn in this presentation, extreme risk protection orders, often shortened to ERPO, are a very effective violence prevention tool that is legal in several states across the U.S. But first, I'd like to share a little bit about our organization. Colorado Ceasefire is the longest-serving gun violence prevention organization in the state. We believe that every Coloradan has the right to be safe where they work, live, learn, and play. So we work to reduce gun violence through education, outreach, and legislative advocacy. As you've seen in this full suite of presentations, there is a continuum of gun access interventions, and ERPO is really one of the last steps that you might want to consider. It's kind of one of the more extreme options, and as other presenters share, there's many other interventions such as in-home secure storage, give the keys, or out-of-home storage that might be a better fit for someone if they're considering how to separate themselves or someone they care about from a firearm. But now we'll dive into ERPO. This is an excellent tool for gun violence prevention because families, medical providers, educators, and law enforcement are often the first ones to see warning signs of behavioral or mental health problems. But without an ERPO, there's very little that they can do. One of the most important things to remember about an ERPO is that it is a civil procedure, not a criminal procedure. ERPOs enable a select group of people the ability to petition the court to temporarily remove an individual's firearms and prevent further access if that person poses a significant risk to themselves or others. An ERPO should be considered if the person has access to firearms and makes statements of self-harm, threatens to harm others, including domestic, family, or peer violence, threatens mass harm, including school shootings, threats of domestic terrorism or violent extremism, or just generally can behave unsafely with firearms. It's important to note that a mental or behavioral health diagnosis is not required. And of course, in the act of an immediate crisis or emergency, calling 911 is your best option. So in Colorado, several people can file an ERPO: law enforcement, household members, educators, school administrators, and higher education faculty, or licensed healthcare and mental health professionals. The definition of a household is quite broad, so it actually includes those who are related by blood, marriage, or adoption, have a child in common, resided with the respondent in the last 6 months, or domestic partners, step-parents, stepchildren, grandparents, grandchildren, legal guardians, or past or present married or unmarried couples. You will know it does not include neighbors, friends, or coworkers. Before we dive in, there's 2 key terms that you need to know. The petitioner is the person who files the petition, and the respondent is the person who is believed to be dangerous to themselves or their others. I find it helpful to provide an example. So if I was concerned about my brother and I wanted to file an ERPO on him because he was resistant to separating himself from his firearms and he was showing many warning signs of violent acts, I would be considered the petitioner, the person filing the petition, and my brother would be considered the respondent, who is the person we're believed to be danger to themselves or others. So when you go to obtain an ERPO, there's a couple steps. First, you're going to request a petition from a county or district court or download from the court system website. If you're writing by hand, just be really careful that your handwriting is clean and clear and able to be read. Then you're going to take that completed form that you signed, you have to sign it by hand, to the court where the county, to the court in the county where the respondent lives. There's no fee to file, and there are sometimes Sherlocks available to help you with the filing process. These Sherlocks cannot provide legal advice, and they're not there all hours of the day, but if they are there, they can help answer some questions you may have. There is a small exception to step 2. Following the ERPO expansion law in 2023, household members have a little bit more flexibility where they can file. Household members can file in the county where either party resides, in the county where either party is employed, in the county where the acts that are the subject of the ERPO occurred. But other petitioners, so law enforcement, educators, medical providers, they have to file in the respondent's county of residence. So there are 2 types of ERPOs. The first being temporary ERPOs, or sometimes called TERPOs. Oftentimes people go and file a TERPO first because it's a little bit of a faster process. The TERPO hearing will be held ex parte, which means the respondent, my brother, the person we're concerned about, will not be notified of the hearing and is highly unlikely to be present. A TERPO hearing will occur within 1 court day, and if the judge finds cause, then the TERPO is valid for up to 14 days. This is part of a continuous process. So typically the TERPO hearing is held first, again, without the respondent, has a lower standard of evidence, and then we'll go on and file, most people go on and file an ERPO petition that has a higher standard of evidence. We'll talk about that now. So as I said, many people go on to file an ERPO after a TERPO was approved. In an ERPO petition, you should be prepared to provide the following: information that indicates if the respondent poses a significant risk of injury to self or others, information that indicates if the respondent possesses or plans to purchase a firearm, and you'll sign an affidavit that is under oath and penalty of perjury. During the ERPO hearing, or leading up to the ERPO hearing, several things will happen. The respondent, so my brother in this case, will be notified of the hearing, and both the respondent and the petitioner will be expected to be present at the hearing. The court will appoint an attorney to represent the respondent so they've received free legal representation. And the court will schedule that hearing, and again, both the petitioner and respondent will be expected to attend. During the hearing, any of the following may occur. There may be testimony from the petitioner, the respondent, and any witnesses. They'll consider sworn affidavits from the parties or witnesses. They'll review the respondent's criminal history record, review any available mental health or chemical dependency evaluations. They'll consider whether the respondent meets a standard for court-ordered evaluation for persons with mental health disorders or an emergency commitment. And the petitioner and respondent will be permitted to present evidence and cross-examine witnesses presented by the other party. Once the ERPO is granted, the respondent will be directed to surrender any guns in their possession. The order will be served either in person in court or by a law enforcement agency. The respondent will also receive a list of behavioral health resources. The court will notify the Colorado Bureau of Investigation to flag the respondent on the firearm background check so they're not able to purchase any additional firearms. And, the whole purpose, the respondent will not be able to possess or purchase a firearm for either 2 weeks if it's a TURPO or 1 year if it's an ERPO. The respondent has the ability to appeal the decision once during the year if it is an ERPO that was granted. Once the ERPO or the TURPO is expired or been terminated, firearms are returned 3 days after the respondent requests them. They must request them for them to be returned. The respondent must also be able to pass a background check. The National Criminal Background Check System records will be updated, saying that this person is able to purchase a firearm again, and the respondent may reapply for a concealed carry permit. So, ERPOs, it's a large process and people can become kind of confused or maybe a bit defensive about them, but it's important to remember that all ERPOs are temporary. It's a civil procedure, it's under due process protections, and requires a judicial finding of significant risk. An ERPO is not permanent, it's not a criminal liability, it's not an arrest or a mental health hold. And just here's a couple ERPO success stories I like to share. In Larimer County in 2020, a judge granted an emergency ERPO against a 32-year-old man after he sent texts threatening to commit 2 school shootings to his father. The man, a military veteran, conveyed in the text messages that he had trouble finding work and that if his parents did not just stop demanding repayment of money he owed them, he would kill a lot of people. Although police found no firearms in the home, when they served the order, the man had communicated plans to buy 2 firearms. After a hearing at which he appeared with counsel, a judge issued a final order prohibiting from purchasing or possessing firearms. I won't read the other examples for time's sake, but you can pause the presentation if you'd like to read the other examples. But we see how ERPOs can be critical tools to prevent large-scale tragedies when used correctly. And then, of course, there's different filing support options. First of all, Colorado runs a 24/7 ERPO hotline that's dedicated to receiving and referring calls related to ERPO. The hotline can't provide legal advice, but they can answer questions about, where you should go next, if this is the right fit for you, things like that. It's also important to note that there's no civil or criminal liability for filing or for failing to file an ERPO. So if someone you're concerned about, like my brother, he went on to commit an act of violence, I would not be held liable for not filing an ERPO. It is important to know that there is a liability for petitioners if they maliciously or falsely file a petition. So if I, wanted to get back at my brother for something and he wasn't actually at risk of committing a violent act and I filed an ERPO, and if the courts, through the examination process, they'll see that I don't have liable evidence, then I can be held liable for a malicious or bad faith filing. But again, if you file and it is in good faith and you just don't have the exact evidence you need or you're not the right person, you're not going to be held liable. Someone will just correct you through the process. We also like to know that law enforcement typically have much higher success rates when filing an ERPO. This is because they're really familiar with the court system, court forms, the judges, and citizens also make many errors on the form, such as filing in the wrong county. They don't have the right relationship. They don't meet the standard of evidence needed. And so we always encourage people to consider reaching out to law enforcement to ask for help with filing, or they might be able to file on your own behalf. Their willingness to do so might depend on the county that you're in, but it's always worth trying. If you have any questions about ERPO, you can visit Colorado Ceasefire's website or send us an email at info@coloradoceasefire.org, or consider reaching out to the Colorado ERPO hotline, which is 855-999-3776. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lainey. A lot of information there about ERPOs. Does anybody have any questions for Lainey right now? Got it all figured out? She did a good job.
While,
Okay.
I think someone had a question. I was just going to say, while you guys are thinking, I'm not sure if I fully mentioned this in the video, but the Department of Law, the AG's office, they've released fantastic ERPO training resources that you can literally just go to their website and click, where they have videos that are just, that slide deck was a lot of text, a lot of talking. It's just a lot more accessible for folks and can also be tailored to their profession if they're educators, law enforcement. So definitely consider recommending that resource to folks.
Great. I think some of that might be on the resource sheet, and if it isn't, we're going to update it and include that on that resource sheet, the different training material on ERPOs that the Attorney General's office has developed. That's great.
Awesome. Yeah, and we have Katie Fowler on the call, who oversees that program as well.
Right.
So just
I saw Katie
resources
here. Yeah.
Thanks for the shout out, Lainey. Always appreciate it.
Susie, one more thing to share about ERPO that's so exciting, which we learned at our last, Susie and I attend the meetings of the Attorney General's ERPO Training Task Force, and we just learned that they are going to, in the process of creating a pro bono program for family members and individuals considering whether it's appropriate to file an ERPO petition, because we do fund law services for the person who's having the ERPO filed against them, but it's a very legal process, and the family members and everyday people like us can be at a loss. So we're very excited to see this new piece developed. And well, Rita, can you put up the last slide? And we're going to really work hard to get everyone out. It's quite ritual to say special thanks, but we are not professionals, with the exception of John and Marie. But we turn to the top professionals. We wanted this to be accurate, up to date, and so we turned to, before we even developed this, we developed teaching points and ran them by these people: Lena Heilman, who was the former director of the Office of Suicide Prevention in the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment; Molly Siegel, the director of the Office of Gun Violence Prevention; and Katie Fowler, who's with us today from the Office of the Attorney General. And we are novices, as you can tell, and we could not have made this video without the technical help of Lawrence Hermans, who also was a presenter today. So please join me in thanking our speakers. I have to tell you, they came to umpteen meetings. They got all kinds of feedback. They actually had to re-record their segments. And in addition to that, this resource sheet we keep talking about, it includes their personal emails. And these are the people who walk their talk. If you have questions that didn't get answered tonight, you can contact Lainey and Lauren and Lawrence, and they will get back to you if you have questions for them. So please, we've sent you the link. This resource sheet is just rich in resources. And if we didn't just sit down and do a Google search, we asked the people you heard from tonight, give us your best resources. And that's what's reflected on that sheet. And just to remind you one more time, tomorrow, you'll be receiving a very brief online evaluation form, because we really value your feedback. We're beginners on this and we're learning and we want to make it better. every time we do it. It's intended primarily for in-person presentations because we want to work as a community, whether it's in congregations or organizations, to tackle this problem, this major problem in Colorado. But be sure to let us know if you'd like to host a presentation in your congregation or organization. And one more thing I've seen this any number of times, but it really, when I see it, it reflects our growth in our thinking, our knowledge, and our understanding about this issue. We used to focus on just the providing personal support. Then the focus was on secure storage. And then we had a primary focus on ERPO. And thanks to so many of the people you heard from tonight, we realized only you had to have a comprehensive approach. One of these pieces without the others will not solve the problem. So finally, I really want to thank all of you for this is not a short presentation, for taking the time to learn with us what we can do to prevent firearm suicides. Simply talking and showing support can save lives. And together, as caring people, we can bring Colorado's way too high numbers down. So thank you so much.